Now, to dive right into the topic we have at hand, that is the US stopping financial aid and fate of Nigeria and Africa.
Mm.
So Donald Trump has really been he has been signing some documents of key reform, which it is not unexpected because these are the things that he used in his campaign. But now that we have things like this affecting us in Nigeria, first of all, let us even look at how do you feel about most of these reforms that he has been signing this past days that he has been elected as president of the US?
Well, to be honest with you, the expectations that a chunk of people put onto Trump, for some of us, aren't really coming strangely, in the sense that Trump actually campaigned around these policies. I mean, for me, the antecedent of Trump speaks about what is happening as at this material point in time, which is not shocking in any way. So I think, firstly, for us, we are not taken aback in any way about what Trump is currently doing. As a matter of fact, during his first coming, some of these policies were actually articulated and in fact implemented. Some of these policies were implemented by Trump. Let us not forget that in 2018, just when he came on board, he stopped funding some organizations. As a matter of fact, he denied the WHO of a greater chunk of, US billions of US dollars. He denied WHO and several organizations, such fundings. So for me, what is happening right now is not coming as a total shock. But we must also say that the world deserves, a better hegemon. What we are seeing right now is just a display or a fair reality of the fact that the United States of America, with all due respect, is not the kind of hegemon that the world needs. It's not the kind of hegemon that will bring progress to the entirety of the globe. And that's why for us, there's a necessity to begin, to call the United States of America to caution, and to say that if the United States of America will turn out to become what she is right now, then there's a necessity for the international system to have a total direction, quite different from what the Western nation, led by the United States of America is currently putting us into.
Okay, all right. So now that this reform is already there from signed, there's nothing anyone could do about it unless one person is able to appeal to Donald Trump, especially when it comes to the aid that comes to Africa. The one that actually is a lot of concern for a lot of Nigerians are people living with HIV and AIDS, and then although a waiver has been granted, an active waiver have been granted for the HIV/AIDS medication and all that, but now looking forward, how do we in Africa, how do we tear away from being the usual recipient of this foreign aid at all times? How do we stop being at the mercy and then just stop being this charity case that we have seen to paint that picture for ourselves when it comes to our relationship with Western world?
But it's quite unfortunate, really, because the conventional media appears to show that the African continent, is at the mercy of the Western world, which indeed we are. Politically, economically, socio-culturally, we are under the whims and practices of the Western nation led by the United States of America. And that's why for some of us, I think it is extremely embarrassing and insulting that you have government personnel, that you have individuals, apologizing to Trump, saying that, that the African continent cannot do anything without these fundings. I think that shows clearly, the depth of the fact that our eight-pound string team now is still tied to the West. When countries today in the international system are breaking ties with these countries, you are still subservient to the point that you cannot provide yourself with HIV drugs. I mean, that's quite embarrassing. And the fact that you will have Minister of Health across the African continent pleading, begging, jubilating that a waiver has been announced by, the government of that country, just clearly shows how backward we are across the African continent. We should be talking about, indigenous, discovery of HIV drugs. We should be talking about judging our own, circumstances, inventing our own drugs, putting our own ways of development, not to continue to, ride around all of these Western organizations to do for us what we can in natural fact do for ourselves. So I think it is extremely wrong that we would have all these government personnel, you have organizations, calling for a return of these aids or calling for a waiver. And let us say this, we have been warned by Thomas Sankara, many years ago, that forget it, anything about foreign aids is about the recolonization of the African continent. Foreign aids are synonymous, to the recolonization of the African continent. Essentially, we have three forms of foreign aids. You know, you have humanitarian aid, you have government to government aids, and you have that, you know, that arises when there's a crisis and what have you. I mean, the international system. But, you know, the kind of aid that we have consistently had across the African continent, you cannot really call them humanitarian aids, because these are aids that have, in fact, you know, allowed the continuous flow of capital back to the metropolis, in the sense that they give you these aids, but they collect profit in tenfolds of these aids. I mean, these aids are responsible for why we have, you know, the economic catastrophe that we have currently in Nigeria. You know, the fact that you have government that will collect loans, that will take to all of these conditions and what have you, speak about why we are facing inflation, speak about why the rate of insecurity is what it is right now, because there's a turmoil, you know, across the political economic space of this country. So for us, it must be made clear that for societies that want to progress in the 21st century, we should jettison, we should throw into the trash can of history anything that points to AIDS. You know, anything that points to AIDS should be jettisoned out of, you know, our modus operandi at this time, because AIDS will not bring about development. As a matter of fact, there is a woman, you know, Maru Honey. She happened to be a very top official of USAID. During her time, you know, this is about, I mean, sometimes they're going in the 2010s rather. She said that, you know, whether we like it or not, that the entirety of what USAID encompasses, you know, is a catalyst for them to have more South Koreas than North Koreas. That's how she put it. Not even South Korean or no. No, she said the purpose, the ultimate purpose, the ultimate agenda of USAID in the international system is to have more South Koreas than North Koreas. In other words, countries that we, you know, that we dance to the tune of the US. You know, countries that would mimic whatever is happening in the United States of America. Not countries that will you know, create their own, you know, developmental path. So for us, we are clear about it, or we should be clear about it. Foreign aid as at this material point in time is a form of recolonization. It's part and parcel of why the African continent is what it is now. So we don't make any apologies for Trump. Well, we are not in any way apologetic, or we shouldn't be apologetic to Trump or the entirety of the US political system. I mean, a dispensation for saying that they are reduced. I mean, in the first instance, what tax are we paying into the, you know, into the American society to begin to say that, you know, we deserve some amount of money? But again, it is clear that the US itself is hypocritical, you know, because that point must be made clear. The wealth, the entirety of the wealth that abounds US today are wealth that US got as a result of our involvement in war crimes. You know, the entirety of the wealth, you know, not just the war crimes, of course, the slavery itself, the enslavement of, you know, mass of African people in that society for over 400 years is responsible for the wealth. The criminality that that country had caused in the international system is responsible. So that country, the United States of America, do not have any financial genuity, you know, do not have that moral upstanding to put out a chest out that, you know, she's morally guiding the international system. No, when you have actually committed crime, go back to the Cold War. Look at the crimes that the United States of America created across the world. You know, look at the bombings in South Vietnam. Look at the whole killings in Korea. So that country basically shouldn't even be, you know, in charge of any moral, you know, jurisdiction in the international system today. But she is, clearly, because she has that so-called military superiority. So I think that country again should shut up. You know, that country should keep quiet in the terms of, you know, insulting other countries in the international. You know, it is about the chickens of the United States of America coming home to roost. That's what it is. US had created problems in Africa. US had created problems in Asia. US had created problems in the Middle East. And the nationals of these places are running down to US for survival. And you are telling them to go back. Go back to where? Go back to the turmoils that you've created in all of these places. Go back to the turmoil you've created in South America. Go back to the turmoil you've created in the Middle East. I think it is just insulting, you know, that you will have a president that will have the audacity, you know, to say all of these things publicly.
Okay, all right. But then, if we are trying to look at it from the angle of this stopping the aid might actually be a wake-up call for us in Africa, that we should stop relying on foreign aid. Then, in the long run, is this stoppage of the aid, is it not a good thing for us in Africa then, if you have to look at it in the long run?
Oh yeah, I mean, like I said earlier on, I mean, what this period does for us is that it's going to force us, you know, to go back to, you know, to go back to the drawing board. to ask ourselves logical questions about development, because no society in history, had emerged or had risen to prominence without not developing its own developmental path. I have never seen that country in the entirety of the history books that I've read. Societies that want to be progressive will intentionally, create their own developmental path, developmental systems and structures. And so yes, what this period affords us with is opportunity to begin to ask ourselves logical questions around development. But I have no illusion at all in the current, ruling class on the African continent. The current ruling class across the African continent are beggars. They will continue to beg until we get rid of them. I'm saying this because when you begin to look at how apologetic, some of these governments have been over the days, you have the president of Nigeria, for instance, saying that Trump should rethink and all of these things. So what that really means is that all of these elements in power are not sincere or are not in fact interested in our own, developmental, in creating our own, developmental path. They are not, because what this moment provides us, as I said earlier on, is that opportunity, is that ground, to begin to articulate our progress. But we must say this, which is the problem around foreign aid. Foreign aids, intentionally, the ultimate, the intent and purpose, behind most foreign aids is to also excuse the existing members of the political class from their roles, is to make them irresponsible, which is why for some of us, we are extremely, not happy about the fact that across the African continent today, you have the hegemony of the NGOs, not governmental organizations. No. Because in actual fact, what the existence of many of these NGOs are doing, is really to excuse the government from their ultimate duty. Today across the African continent, you have NGOs talking about water, you have NGOs talking about, doing something, practical something about it, and whereas you have the government folding its arms and what have you. So what foreign aid does, side by side with the existence of NGO and all of these, private initiatives that point to no development in long term, what they do is to render the African, ruling class, members of the African ruling class, almost irresponsible. So they are not active in anything. They are not concerned about providing jobs for the mass of the people. They are not interested in coming up with radical economic policies that will transform the nation. That is why we are extremely anti, anything that points to hate.
Okay, but if we are to look at the policies of this present administration when it comes to getting investors in the country, making sure that people are employed, creating jobs, how would you rate it if we are to look at, if they are taking these steps to, make us self-sufficient, and now that aids are not coming in, do you think that the effort that they've gotten so far and the aid stopping, do you think that it might actually help us now that we're not getting aids anymore with all the efforts that the present administration is putting in to make sure that we are self-sufficient as a country?
Well, I would say this, that when you look at the question of, HIV drugs, right, which happens, and for me, I think that is why I'm very, very passionate about this discussion also, because again, our people cannot, continue to live under terrible conditions because they are HIV patients. The survival of the lives of our people should be extremely, sort of concern to us, to the point that we'll come up with whatever that needed to be come up with, and that's why for me, I think there must be an urgent, intervention by the government across. There must be an urgent intervention by AU around this matter, because to be honest with you, governments across the African continent are indifferent to coming up with these measures. No matter what we say right now, no matter what we articulate right now, the point is that all of these elements, we still put all down to US donors, and that is the alternative for them. And that's why for me, I think that we should be making concrete demands from this, not this government, from the international organizations, from the regional organizations, from the continental organizations we have around us. Because if we do not do this, these governments across the African continent will not be held accountable on the necessity that they have to provide the mass of our people with.
Okay, all right. Now, when it comes to the issue of our will, we know that it's not that we are starved of resources in Africa. We have plentiful resources.
Very
in fact,
true.
it's part of the reason why a lot of these foreign countries, they can't cut aid, they can't cut connection with us completely because of the things that they also derive.
Absolutely.
So now, how would you say tackling corruption in Nigeria, what impact would it have in us being self-sufficient? Because most of this aid that we receive at the end of the day, maybe if they will do a little calculation, they will tell you that, okay, it went to this, it went to that one. But a lot of journalists have done a lot of investigation, and then at the end of the day, it's almost untraceable. Because it's as if the aid just gets to the pocket of few, and then all Nigerians are asking, where exactly is the money? So how would you say tackling corruption would also make us more self-sufficient as a country?
Well, corruption is not an object that lives in the abstract. You know, corruption is symptomatic of the existing political economic system. Corruption do not exist in the air. If the capitalist economic system you're operating under is nefarious, you cannot but get corrupt tendencies. And which is the point we have continuously made about AIDS. What AIDS provides, again, is an avenue for all of these elements to steal, you know, to render the mass of our people under a backward state of penury. That is what it has continuously been. It provides a means, like a market, you know, where they go into extremely to steal. That is what, you know, the whole idea around foreign aid has been for, you know, the vast majority of the African backward members of the political class. They just go in, and it is also expected in the sense that those that give out these loans do not give out these loans out of any source of sincerity. You know, they didn't give out these loans because they are genuinely interested in transformation. Because if I give you loans for development in a society, I should be interested in what you are going to use these loans for. But the irony of these, you know, international, you know, backward financial institutions is that they give out these loans and back out. You know, extremely nothing. They don't do anything. You know, the only thing they just expect of you, of course, is when you are going to pay back your loan, you know, with high rate of interest. You know, so the madness of this system is such that you cannot, you know, clearly say you want to have a war against corruption within the context of foreign aids and all of that, without not addressing the economic structure that has continuously made this kind of system possible in the first instance. You know, because you cannot begin to, you know, treat a disease merely by looking at its symptoms. You must be interested in the root cause. And that's why for us, we are interested in the root cause of this matter. Why do we even have to engage ourselves in borrowing in the first instance? You know, why do we have to subject ourselves to this economic binary? You know, because we want to survive and all of that, because some elements want to survive, because, you know, members of the ruling class want to amass wealth for themselves. So I think it is clear. You cannot operate an economic system we are operating right now, you know, in backward economic system we are operating at, without not having, you know, corruption as, you know, as an institution, because it is an institution today. Corruption is currently institutionalized in our political economic, you know, system. There's nothing we can do if we do not address, you know, capitalism itself.
All right. So when we look at this, most of these reforms that President Donald Trump is doing in the US right now, it ripples to affect Nigerians in some ways, especially when it comes to migration. A lot of Nigerians will be having difficulty, not just Nigerians, but let us look at Nigerians who will be having difficulties migrating there. To get visa for US now will probably be very difficult. So if we are to look at how this affects our citizens, what would be your advice to Nigerians? Because it seems as if the political will is not there from our leaders to do something about the situation that we have on ground, what can the citizens themselves do to make sure that, okay, we are not a charity case in the world, so to speak? Well,
I think it is for us to firstly understand that there is no shortcut to, quote unquote, paradise. There is no shortcut to progress. I think we attempted to shortcut, quote unquote, is responsible for what Fela has called perambulation. You know, we're just going all around. We are not essentially making progress. For some of us, we have noticed the old JAPA system, you know, consequent to, you know, the turmoil that we have within this, you know, political economic space of ours. And we have also seen that, you know, there's a great level of shock that majority of our people that goes out there, you know, there's a majority of shock that confront them, you know, the social realities that confront them in those societies, the political realities, and also the racism that confronts our people, you know, in those societies, which for me, it is extremely, saddening, you know, in the sense that you cannot, run away from, say, an ocean, for instance, only to find yourself, you know, in a pit of hell. You know, that is like you are not making any progress in any way. And that is why for us, whether we like it or not, the question of transforming the African continent is a question we must attend to. You know, we cannot talk about progress, you know, we cannot begin to nurse individualistic progress without not, you know, articulating the fact that in the long run, your level of individual progress will become, you know, almost impossible for you to, in fact, to continue to, you know, to ride on that trend. If you do not look at the community, you know, the community has got to be, you know, to be transformed. How do we ensure that the entirety of the resources we have, you know, across the African continent will be within the control of the people? I mean, look at what is happening currently in Congo. You know, look at, you know, the fact that you have people now, you know, returning us to the days of the civil wars, you know, the emergence of, you know, ethnocentrism in that region, which clearly shows that the question of development, actual form of development, has not really been answered across the African continent. We are just, you know, wasting time, because the necessity of revolution, the necessity of transformation within the African continent, Kwame Nkrumah told us, you know, a long time ago, that if we do not ensure that the entirety of our resources are being controlled, managed by the people, that we would, you know, continue with a cannibalistic relationship, which is what we are experiencing today, both internally and externally across the African continent. Within ourselves, we fight ourselves. Outside ourselves, we fight ourselves. So this whole madness, you know, cannot be stopped if firstly we do not address the question of creating an Africanized, you know, political economic structure. You know, we can call it socialism, but interestingly, we must, by all means, you know, come up with our own, you know, economic developmental path. Socialism has provided us with that alternative. And whether we like it or not, this is the alternative we take to, you know, because an alternative that speaks about the nationalization of the entirety of the, you know, commanding might of the economy of the, what other economic system articulates that? You know, what other economic system speaks about the fact that the entirety of the resources in the homeland must be used for the development of the people, must be controlled by? What other economic system articulate this? So if we are consistently, you know, running around from this economic system that many of us have said to be the alternative, you know, we are just really delaying what needs to happen across the African continent, which is nothing but a revolution.
All right then. So